It's so hard to put into words what I'm feeling right now. Um, I am back from Burning Man. I escaped. And it's been, gosh, it's just been, ah, it's so hard to put into words how I'm feeling. Like, every time you come back from Burning Man, you have this overwhelming sense of gratitude for all of the luxuries in your life and all of the the people and the pets and the things about your life that you love and the type of coffee you drink and the routines and the little luxuries that you have in your life. All of these things are amplified, and it's part of the beauty of the experience of going to Burning Man. And oh my God, is that true this year? Like, everyone who was there went through this experience that is going to be so hard to put into words, but I'm going to try. Because it's a story of love, and it's a story of people coming together and facing adversity and working together. And we got to like cosplay Armageddon in the most beautiful way. And yeah, it's one of those things where you just feel incredibly fortunate because you understand what it is that you just experienced, and then also you like have to recover from it a little bit. So I'm going to share with you my experience, and everyone's experience there is totally different and unique. And so I'm not even going to like, it's not that I'm not speaking for the experience. I'm just sharing what my experience was. Whew. Hi, my name is Amy, and if you are new, this is my podcast, Magical Soup, and I have just been sharing stories of the adventures and the spiritual journey that I've been on. And I, you know, I went from being a television network executive, corporate television executive for HGTV, to whatever this is. Um, and Burning Man was instrumental in my journey to waking up to who it is that I am at my core. So I'm sharing stories of the magic that happens in my life that is sort of conspiring for me to step into my full power and expression. And this experience, this burn was like, I can't even, I, I'm part of a camp that's been around for 20 plus years. It's a healing camp. We usually have about 70 people, but there's like a small group of us of about, like a core group of like, well, I mean, it fluctuates, but, somewhere between 3 and 20 who all sort of work really hard to build this healing camp at the burn and provide energy work and body work and healing for body, mind, and spirit on the playa. We gift it. And anyway, I guess that's enough context. I'll be talking more about the early parts of the burn and what it was like to build this year and lead early team I learned an awful lot about myself, but I think this episode we're just going to talk about the insanity that was the mud burn and what that was like. So, if you've been to the playa, you know that rain is really awful because the dust sticks, it becomes clay, and it's like almost impossibly insane how much clay can build up on the bottom of a shoe or a bike tire or a car tire. And it becomes sort of this bizarro quicksand where instead of sinking in, it just clings to you and you can't move. And so when it started raining, there's always like a little bit of like low grade, like, oh, it's interesting because a little bit of rain is great, right? It keeps the dust down and it keeps the playa hard. And the beginning of this burn was so amazing in that way. Like the playa was so hard, so it was really easy to ride bikes, and there wasn't a ton of dust, and the weather was gorgeous. But then it got cold, and then it started raining, and then it did not stop raining. And it was like with each passing half an hour that it continued to rain, you could feel like the concern building because we knew that we were getting into trouble here. We were getting into and no one that I was around had heard about the rain. It was like we knew that there was a possibility, but no one had predicted hours of rain. We had not prepared for it. I started off during the rainstorm, sort of, you batten down the hatches and you protected your things, and then we made. Some of my campmates and I sort of set up this impromptu cocktail bar in our dorm structure where we were listening to French lo-fi and sipping on Prosecco and just sort of enjoying the vibe of a rainy day. And so the dorm structure is this grid of metal poles that go up. I think it was probably ours were like 13 feet in the air. And so we, after last year's really, incredibly hot temperatures, we upgraded to this new dorm structure that had these black sort of plastic, heavy duty, heavy gauge plastic tarps over us that provided hard shade and kept the dorm shaded and cool during the heat of the day. But this structure was made to protect us from the heat and the sun. And it wasn't designed to hold tons of rain. And so, as we're sitting in this dorm structure, sort of zipping up our tents and watching the rain sort of accumulate, what we're realizing is we're looking up at the ceiling, and these tarps are now sagging, and they've got these like giant sort of mini swimming pools of water that are pooling directly over all of our tents. And because this is a new system, there is concern over like how much water can it hold, and what kind of risk are we taking by having tents underneath these giant puddles of water. And also, like, what do we do? Because they're also pretty high in the air, and so there's conversations around like could someone in the middle of the night have 400, well, I don't even know how to quantify, an incredibly massive amount of water just all of a sudden release and spill and flood their tent, and could they potentially be seriously injured from that? And so, in the meantime, this is not something that anyone has predicted. And so, there's only a few of us camp leads who are actually like sort of tuned in to what's happening. Everyone else is sort of sheltering and doing their own thing, and like kind of same thing, like having this probably like really cute, cozy moment. And meanwhile, those of us who are staying under this dorm structure are moving into this sort of emergency response mode because we have to figure out what to do because this rain is not stopping. And so we start finding brooms. So we're thinking like what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of squeegee the water off the sides, and onto the ground, and so to keep the it from building up, to keep the water from building up. And so we organize a team of people, and we find the brooms, and we find some of these poles with like T-bars on the top, and we're sort of pushing the water across these ceilings, and then it starts pouring down over the sides. And depending on where your tent is and how far the water comes out and which sort of funnel pocket it comes through, like we immediately realized that this water could potentially like just destroy someone's tent, just like douse their tent with water and like flood their shit. And so now we're like, okay, we have to get this water off these ceilings, but we also want to be kind to the people whose tents are in the way. And and also like now it's like getting really sticky and smushy on the ground when you pour this water down. So then we're like, okay, let's go grab some coolers. So we have these giant coolers, which is where we sort of store our produce during the burn. And luckily, this is like sort of at the end of the burn. And so we've got a bunch of empty coolers. So people run and grab coolers, and now the idea is we're going to push the water off and we're going to aim it into these coolers and try to catch as much water as possible so that we're not like completely flooding our friends. So at this point I'm like, okay, like how do we make this into a game? Because it feels scary and it feels stressful, and there's something kind, but there is something kind of like crazy and funny about what it is that we're doing. So we like kind of form teams, and we start trying to poke the water. And so what you have to do is you have to push the water a little bit just so that you can see where it's going to flow off the ceiling, and see if your cooler is in line with that, with basically a waterfall. You are creating a waterfall, and you want the waterfall to go in the cooler, and so you do a little bit of a push and see it fall, and then you adjust the cooler, and then you give it a big push, and it freaking flows like crazy, splashing. And like depending on where the cooler is, like sometimes it just splashed so hard that everyone around the cooler got splashed, and sometimes it like hit the back of the cooler and pushed the cooler over. And sometimes you did it slow enough so that it was this beautiful stream into the cooler, and the cooler caught most of it. And we're all like just like hazing or cheering on or whatever the people who were pushing the water. And it was so interesting to see who got the game and who didn't, because there were some people who were pushing, who just were trying to push the water as fast as possible, and it was splashing everywhere. And then everyone would be like, no, no, what are you doing, and but so there was this like incredible moment of game playing and fun and teamwork and ingenuity. Um, and that might have been one of my favorite moments. I have a couple of them, but that was up there. But then we realized that it's this was not going to work. This was not a long-term solution because it was raining so hard and so fast that the ceilings, like, we would do the whole thing, which was a giant structure, and we'd get to the other side and we'd look back and see that that the ceilings had filled up with water again. And now it's getting dark. And we're like, what are we going to do? Because what, we gonna have people like all night long? Like, are we gonna work in shifts and have people all night long trying to push the water off? Are we gonna poke holes in this really thick gauge plastic that's really high up in the air? We like trying to lash a knife to it and poke holes in it so the water can drain? Are we cutting it? Are we taking down the entire roof and like leaving the tents to the elements? And like having the ground become, because the tarps were keeping the ground like sort of more dry than the rest of the playa. Still not great, but better. Um, are we like opening it up to the elements? Like, how are we, and how long is it going to rain, and how long do we have to exist in this sort of mud state? And do we have enough structures for people to evacuate their tents? Like, all of this is like what we're trying to figure out. Um, and so we end up, there's a team that ends up like disconnecting the corners of all of the tarps so that the water does have a place to go and it doesn't collect. But in the meantime, everyone is evacuating the dorm, and we've all like found solid structures that other people are willing to share, so everyone's like willing to open up their structure to our tent refugees. And so no one's going to sleep in the tents or in the dorm structure that night unless they specifically decide that that is what they want to do. But there's plenty of room everywhere for people to bunk up with other people. But then you have to like grab the things that are most important to you out of your tent and carry them across like this muddy mess in order to sort of set up. And you're not sure if everything that you've left behind it could be wrecked. It could be completely flooded. So you're like trying to grab exactly what you need and not forget anything that you're going to regret, because now we realize we might be in this for days. Like, we don't know. Oh my gosh, let me take a deep breath. Yeah. Uh, it was real. I don't think I ate dinner that night. I know that we had, our camp is so freaking kick ass. Our kitchen, oh my God, like the people who were working in the kitchen, like during this, like I could cry because the kitchen was so flooded. Like the, the water is coming through. There was like 3 inches of water on the floor of the kitchen. We have blue tarps everywhere because we want to make sure that we're protecting the playa from all of the stuff that can happen in a kitchen. But then look, the water's collecting, so the kitchen is like this swimming pool, It's got like and so there's another team of people who are using brooms to sweep all the water off the kitchen and to dig a trench around it so that the water has somewhere to go. And we've had to turn the power off. And so now we're like being careful with the food that we have that's remaining that needs to stay cold. And there's a team of people who are still cooking meals. The next morning we wake up and we've got freaking bacon and coffee, which is already a luxury out there. But then when, your entire home has been flooded, the fact that you have people who are resourceful enough to freaking fry up bacon and make coffee is like, it's just ridiculous. It's next level amazing. And so we have this like beautiful cozy kitchen, as cozy as it can be. The picture of me with a concerned look on my face, that's the kitchen floor, and that's the ceiling of the kitchen that has come down because of all of the water, because it's made of parachute fabric and it's heavy and it's like weighted down and it's stretching all of the ropes that we use to hold up the ceiling. And so I happened to be part of a camp that was incredible at identifying who were the most vulnerable in our camp and making sure that they were cared for, and then making sure everyone in the dorm structure was safe, and then making sure that we had enough water. Like immediately we're all told to bring emergency water to the playa. And some people, most people do, some people don't, and this is where the radical self-reliance comes in, because you can kind of get used to knowing you think that your camp has you and that we've got water, but the water's brought in by trucks, and the trucks can't make it in. They can't drive in anymore. And the food delivery, we have produce that gets delivered and that can't come in anymore. And so now all of a sudden we're realizing that we're actually in a place where we need to count on the resources that we have on hand. And so all of a sudden you're like thinking about the luxury chocolate bars that you brought to share with friends, and you're like, ooh, those are gonna come in handy. And you're like thinking about the water that you've brought in, your emergency water, and you're talking about rationing, not rationing in that like there's not enough water for everyone, but now all of a sudden you're not taking showers anymore. We're being very careful about the water that we're using to wash dishes. People need to wash the mud off of their feet, but we can't use fresh water for that. We've got to save that for drinking. And so now all of a sudden these coolers and these bins that we had pushed all of this rainwater into become our foot baths. They become the it's like all of a sudden we're like, don't dump that water out, like save that water, because now we need it to wash off our mud. And try to prevent tracking like 6 inches of mud off the bottoms of our feet into the floor of the kitchen that we have managed to clear off. It's still muddy as fuck, but it's not a swimming pool. And of course, then there's also, electrical cords and power things that we're trying to navigate. We are solar powered because we live in a village and we have the Snow Cone Solar is a camp that has the solar power thing figured out, and so we've teamed up with them and we're using their solar power, and they're trying to figure out how to power the things that are the most important, like the emergency things that really need power. And so to witness all of these burners who are the most resourceful and thoughtful and open hearted and prepared people on the planet, like doing their thing, it was like so, it was like so affirming. In the capability of humanity to pull together in times of crisis. Yeah, it was incredible. And so then the next day, you know, yeah, it was muddy, and yeah, the porta potties were super gross. Like they weren't overflowing. They never overflowed. It's just that there was a mud in the bottoms of them. Like, because people would be walking through the mud and then get into the porta potty and then the mud would pile up. But then there were people who showed up to shovel the mud out of the porta potties. So it was, you know, it was really, truly incredible. The amount of cooperation, and then to even have the fun show up. So the next day, you have this all of a sudden, the playa and the burn has changed into something completely different. And that thing is like we're all trauma bonding in the most beautiful way possible, and people are thinking about ways to make it more fun, and you have people making sculptures out of the mud, and the bars are open and they're serving. We had this lovely bar like across the street from us that's like playing music and serving drinks, and it was just like a place to go to let off a little bit of steam. And now all of a sudden you're realizing what kind of resources you have in your direct neighborhood because you're not going anywhere. And we had a steam bath right there that we got to go in and get clean, and we had warm cuddle spaces, and we had bars, and oh my gosh, one of my favorite things that happened was I went to the porta potties and I came out, and there was a gathering of people in a circle on the corner, and they had songbooks and a speaker, and we had this impromptu sing along. And oh my God, like there is nothing quite so poignant as singing Let It Go with 20 of your new friends slash neighbors who all have songbooks, and somehow our voices together are like one of the most beautiful things that I've ever heard. And we just stand there on the corner serenading our neighbors, singing show tunes and Disney songs, and having the best time, And we the cheers that happened during that and after that, and when we realized that this moment was over. It was this whole burn was about recognizing when a moment is over and honoring the fact that it was this magical experience. Oh my God. I'm getting super emotional. Like recognizing that it was this magical experience that you got to be a part of. And it ends and you move on. And so, you'll always have that. I'll always have that that sing along. But yeah, the moment ended, and we cheered and we hugged each other, and the woman who had organized it and who had brought the songbooks and the music and the speaker and the friends and initiated this magical moment just burst into tears and said thank you to all of us for making her playa dream come true. So we hugged her, and then we just like wandered off. We dispersed back into the playa. Yeah, and that's just how it was out there. It was this beautiful dance between supporting each other and showing up for each other and playing, and the number of people who I just past on the street as we're walking, and you have to move so slowly. Yeah. Yeah, well, what I figured out is like the slowest way to move would be to have shoes on. And people tried plastic bags on their feet, and people tried just plain socks, and people tried socks inside of like boots or shoes. And like what I figured out that day was that it was actually the fastest way to move was in bare feet. And there were like different levels of water, right? Like there was barely any water, which was like actually super slippery. And then there was like, a little bit of water. So your feet kind of felt like went into the mud a little bit, but it didn't grab and hold you. And that was actually the sweet spot, was like in that little bit of water. And if you actually kind of like pranced, like you could actually move pretty fast. You sort of like hopped between like little mud puddles in that zone. You could actually move pretty fast. You kind of were like dancing with the mud a little bit. You were one with the mud. If you went deeper than that, then it sort of grabbed onto your feet and made it a little bit harder to move. So you wanted to avoid sort of the deeper water. So there was like a middle sweet spot. And what's so hilarious is that I I just when I was grabbing the few things, one of the easiest things for me to grab and one of the warmest things for me to wear, because mostly you're having like, you know, either anyway, one of the sort of the most durable and warmest things for me to wear was a rat costume. It's a fox or a rat. I can't decide. It's gray. It's got fur trim and it's got a long furry tail and long sleeves. And I just, it felt like rat. Like I felt like I was a little rat. And what's hilarious is that there's some women in my camp and we were joking about how this was like a rat girl burn and what that means. And the next thing I know, I'm scurrying and like a little rat, like in this like sweet spot, like running, not running, but like kind of run dancing down the streets. And uh and the reaction that I got from people who were passing me going the other way was like super fun. Cause uh yeah, because it was just silly and I was, playing with the mud rather than fighting the mud. Um and that was super fun. And then there were times when just, people that you were passing on the street would look you in the eye and sort of be like, yeah, we got this. You got this. You're doing great. You're doing great. You got this. And the love and the affirmations and the joy that was present during this natural disaster, this climate disaster, was next level beautiful. Next level beautiful. So during the course of that day, the people who I am supposed to be leaving the playa with, because we were supposed to be leaving on Saturday, which is the next day, are still thinking like we can, like, let's think about getting out of here. If the org says it's okay, like, let's get out of here. And I have a lot of feelings about that. And I'm still sort of processing through that part of it. But I know that afternoon, I decide to walk. I want to walk down our street and try to get out to the playa. Like I wanted to see, like, so you're in a village, you're in the city, and then you can walk down to the 10 o'clock And then you can see like the man and the temple and the art and the vastness of the playa. And I just, I don't know, I wanted to see it. And so at this point, I am trying just socks and bare feet. I mean, not bare feet, but I have like really long, warm socks on. Um, and but they're of course wet and muddy at the bottom. And I just start walking down our street, and I end up walking in step with this man who I can only describe as a Mexican shaman. He's wearing, like a serape, and he's just this incredibly handsome man with a beautiful smile and warm eyes. And we start talking, and he ends up leading me to a platform. So I realize as we're walking that it's taking too long. Like it's too far for me to get out to Deep Playa. And he knows of this platform. And so we walk like arm in arm, and we get to the platform, and I climb up, and we get there just as the sun is setting. And it's high enough that I can like survey the city, and I can see Deep Playa, and I can see the man and the temple, and I can see the sunset. There's actually some sun coming through. Oh my God, I forgot about the most incredible part. Like one of them, like it's so, the whole thing is incredible, but like then there was this moment earlier in that day where the rain stopped, paused, and the sun came out. And then this enormous double rainbow came out over the entire playa. And it was like such a scene from a movie, like so unreal. And all of us who were in camps and saw it just started cheering because it's one of those moments that you'll never forget, like for as long as you live. But then it started raining again and the sun went away. And so now it's the sun is setting, and it's peeked through the clouds a little bit, and it's made this sort of reddish pink band across the entire playa, this like line across the playa. And then the mountains that surround the playa are lit up with pinks and reds. And then there's like the blues and the grays and the purples of the clouds. Like, and the sunsets and the sunrises out there are some of the most beautiful in the world. And I'm saying that with not with some knowledge. Um, and I just stood up on that platform watching the sunset for on this incredible day, and I'm just crying. And I'm crying because of the beauty that is this event, this magical thing, this thing that transformed and changed my life for the better. So it's the thing that helped me to feel alive, to become alive, and to wake up to all of the masking and all of the ways that I was not showing up as my true and fully expressed self, and the sense that I had when I was up there was that I was saying goodbye. And considering that's been the theme of this burn, was understanding when a moment is over, when a scene has ended, when something has come to its conclusion. It hit me when I was up there watching that sunset that it felt like a goodbye. And I don't, it's too soon to like really like think about what that means but I did. I said goodbye. And so I went back that night and moved back into my tent so that I could be with all of my things, all of my, you create this cozy nest when you're there. And this year I had really dialed it in, it's my 6th year. So I had been organized and I didn't spend too much time digging through things, and I had the creature comforts and so I went back to my tent and I was freezing. That was one of those other things where I realized after the sunset that I had walked quite a distance and I did not have my winter gear with me. I was wearing daytime gear, and not only that, but my feet were wet and covered with mud in these socks. And so I all of a sudden realized that I needed to get home and I needed to do it really quickly because it was getting cold very fast. And so I just, put my head down and tried to channel that like sort of one with the mud thing that I had been practicing all day. Um, and I ended up taking off my socks and just being in bare feet, you know, even though being in bare feet in when it's getting that cold is not comfortable, but it was the fastest way for me to move. And so I tried to run as best as I could without slipping and falling, all the way back to camp. And then I got into our steam bath, and that was fun because I like go over to the steam bath and I open the door and I step inside, and it's like so many of my friends are in there, and we just have a cute connection time in the steam bath together. And then I make the cold journey back to my tent and I snuggle into my bedding, and I have these cute little fairy lights on, and I'm just sort of laying there thinking about the day. And all of a sudden I hear newbie, newbie. And, that's my playa name. And I'm like, I'm in here. And it's my friend Carlito, who he's just such a love and such a dear spirit. And he's like camping all the way across the playa. So it's like it was the last thing that I expected was to have a visit from a friend who like is living on the other side of the city. But he made it over, and he made it, and he crawled in my tent, and we were snuggled in blankets and sort of talking about our experience. So that was really sweet and lovely. And, you know, those of you who know Carlito know like how great that was for me. He's awesome. And and then I went to bed. And the next day, we the people in my camp who were leading strike and leading the breakdown of the camp, sort of stepped into full gear and got organized. And the people who who I was leaving with were like kind of saying, "Hey, get ready because we could leave today." And so then you start the arduous task of packing up all of your things, and it's already a difficult task to begin with, but now you're like doing it in mud, and all of your things are covered in mud. And then I was really still not sure about the ability to leave. But then a member of the Burning Man org came by our camp, and they sort of let us know that the gate wasn't closed, and that if you had the means, if you had four-wheel drive, if you had a vehicle that could navigate this mud, and that you weren't going to need to be rescued, that it was, you could leave, that it was okay to leave. And it's interesting the way that they are rolling out this information, right? Because if you're listening to the radio is still saying, shelter in place. But my guess is that, and it does kind of make sense. And I know that there will be a lot of sort of dissecting how the org handled this and what they did, and what information was broadcast, and how it was said the way that it was said, and all of that. But when I think about the task ahead, and think about the fact that you needed to have people not all trying to leave at the same moment, right? Like you just can't have 70,000 people all of a sudden be like, okay, gates are open. And so I think what they were trying to do was to get people to think strategically about whether or not they could actually make it off of the playa. And if you could make it off, that it was a good idea to start quietly filtering people off of playa to ease the pressure. And so that's what my group did. That's what we did. And we were fortunate enough to be in a four-wheel drive truck. And I had this loving family of people who we like piled in. I mean, and it was not comfortable. We were stacked on top of each other. And it was very slow going, and it was surreal to be driving through the city and then make it out. My guess is that the getting off of playa will be everyone's universal worst part. And that also, that was, yeah, it was interesting. And then there was also sort of this low grade FOMO, believe it or not. There was gratitude for the ability to get off and to leave. And then there was also FOMO because of the beautiful way that people were showing up for each other. And man, I gotta think that man burn and the temple burn, I hope that everyone who stays behind has the most incredible experience of their lives. I hope that they sit in this feeling of, you missed out because you weren't here. I that is my wish and my prayer for the people who are sticking it out until the end. I hope it's the most rewarding thing that they ever do in their lives. And I'm so incredibly grateful for, I was already grateful for my teammates who stay through strike, because I show up early and I leave early. And some people show up later and stay later, and I'm always incredibly grateful for those people. And this year, especially grateful. We had the best camp. We had such a beautiful, amazing experience together, and I already miss it. I miss the camaraderie and the connection. If you wonder why people do this, if you have never been, and if you look at the pictures and you read the news stories, which don't even begin, the news stories are so weird. They're so out of touch with what's actually happening. No big surprise, right? But it's it's so interesting to have lived it and then to see the news stories and have there be such a disconnect between what it was and how people talk about it. When you get back to civilization, all of the things that you love 1,000 times more. There's never been a better shower. There's never been a better shower than the shower that you take to rinse that mud off. And you come back to this world and you think about how much you want to bring that here and how much you want that to be not the tragedy, not the catastrophe, but the sense of community and belonging, and working together and doing something meaningful together and creating joy out of chaos. All of that is why we do it. I like to say when I have these incredible experiences like this, like you can't pay for that experience. Like you can't. It's the gift that was this year will never happen again in the same way. And I will be forever grateful that I got to be there. If you're in my camp and you're listening to this, I'm sorry that I wasn't there till the end. I'm sorry that I scampered out of there and didn't get a chance to say goodbye. And I love you. Thank you for everything.